Kolomer karava mar ma'ikra. Kol basar chatzir v'chol chasto ketzitza sadeh. Yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai navshabo. Lachen chatzir ha'am yavesh chatzir navel tzitz udvar Eloheinu yakum leolam. A voice says, cry out. And I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when a wind of the eternal blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. Death has taken our beloved Peter Connors Andrews, and our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them, for Peter's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness. They tell us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzat resha'im. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit, its period in season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Va'alehu lo yibol v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. We welcome, for the honor of sharing some words from the book of Deuteronomy with us, the Ve'ahavta, chapter 6, verse 5. We welcome Peter's daughter, Julia Andrews.
This is a very ancient prayer, and it's always been viewed as a commandment, as a challenge to accept the 10 Commandments and attempt to accept the Jewish God. But I have always heard it every time as an offer of a way of life that you present to your children. You offer them a moral path. What's a good thing to do? What's a bad thing to do? Mostly, hopefully, the good thing. So, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lecha. I'm sorry, I'm just going to read the English. Sorry. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Take to heart these instructions which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. I always thought that that's what my dad always tried to do, to inscribe them on our gates. Okay, sorry.
to have thoughts of goodness and devotion to the eternal upon our hearts and in our soul, and to devote all of our strength, every measure of ourselves towards upholding what's good and worthwhile in our world. That is something that we can truly speak in praise of your Father. May his memory always be a blessing to you, Julia. We welcome Ben to share with us the translation of Psalm 23 following the Hebrew. Adonai roi lo echsar bino she'ar b'tzeni amem menuchot yenachaleni nafshi yeshover Yancheni b'maglet tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech b'ketz almavet lo yirara ki ata imadi Shivtecha umshantecha hemayenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai deshanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya Ach tov chesed yirafuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai roi lo echsar
Thank you. Before I read these words that my father wanted to be read here, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming to celebrate with us, my father, and to be with us as we say one final farewell. This is, the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, and he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, and they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And when I did go and visit with my dad, I would always love to read to him, not necessarily this, usually things that he had written, but I did love reading to him. You know. Thank you.
Privileged to welcome Molly, one of the six, to share words on her father.
Hi, everyone. It's really beautiful. Got to start again. See, I need my little brother. Yeah, it's just beautiful to see so many people who love my dad and who love our family, and to see our amazing family and the newest addition, little Teddy, and all of us gathered here in this extraordinary sanctuary. So I, like Ben and Julie before me, wanted to say thank you for the efforts you've made. So I wrote a few things. I didn't even know where to start. But anyway, I tried to put together something, and I'm going to try to make my way through it. So in March of this year, I was visiting my father immediately following the funeral of my beloved Aunt Rita Ann, who my father called his sister. It was the morning after the very special event hosted by the Birchfield Penny in honor of my parents. And I'm just looking at Scott there. My dad was in absolute top form that night. Over our early morning coffee, which was a real tradition with us, it occurred to me that now was the time to review the arrangements he had made 5 years ago to mark the end of his life. Most of the service we're having today was, in fact, of his choosing. When he told me he wanted us to read Psalm 23, which Ben has just done so beautifully, he recited it to me by heart. And when he came to the lines, "My cup runneth over," my dad teared up. This said to me so much. My father was someone who deeply loved the life he had been given and the life he had made, and never tired of its beauties, both natural and in human relationships. He never had to be reminded that he should appreciate what he had. It was simply who he was. You'll notice on the back of the program a list of my dad's top 10 jokes. Anyone who knows him knows how he loved to laugh. And when I think of him, I can see those sparkly eyes and hear his giggle. I remember once him making 6 copies of a very good photo of himself, rowing here on Lake Erie. And on the back of each, he wrote to whichever child he was giving it to X, my favorite child. He thought this was very funny, but in some ways it was also true. Each of us was his favorite child in some way. We were not only loved by him, but he recognized and nourished our individual gifts. He and my mom both encouraged us to find our own paths in life, and thus it is that the 6 of us have gone into very different fields of work. Still, you do not have to look very far to see where I, for instance, developed a love of political stories. When my parents were dating a rather long time ago, they discussed the nature of love. My dad had just read a really schmaltzy story in Reader's Digest, which, focusing on the life of young chicks, suggested that the best way to nurture these young creatures was to hold them in an open palm. And for the rest of his days, my father used this metaphor as a model of his love, and I have tried my best to do the same. The fact that my kids, when they were small, put me on an I love you diet, restricting me to confessing my love to them only once a day, might indicate that I did not entirely succeed. A few months ago, after one of our visits to my mom's grave, I asked my dad what follows when someone dies. His answer was clear and moved me deeply. While he dismissed any material existence, gesticulating like this, he said to me, "When someone dies, if you love them, truly love them," and here he clasped his beautiful hands like this, "then your souls will be forever entwined." And this I know to be true. My darling Father, you are released from the body that held you, but you will be with us as long as we live. I love you and will miss you terribly.
We welcome Louise to share her own words on her father. Oh, no? I'm so sorry. Cousin Benita Louise, I've heard of you. Sorry for your loss.
Molly mentioned that Peter had 6 favorite children, but he only had 1 favorite niece. Well, you don't see anyone else up here, do you? I am now the oldest person in our family. I'm up here representing my brother Jeremy, who's over there, our sister Liz, who sadly couldn't come, and most of all, my parents, Rita Ann, Joni's sister, and Al, who both shared a deep love and bond with Peter. Both my mom and dad thought of Peter as their brother. There was always a golden glow around Peter C. Andrews. From the time I was a little girl, I knew he was special by the way my mom spoke about him with such admiration. Peter and Joan and the kids are all taking Hebrew lessons before going to Israel, and it was Peter's idea. Not many non-Jews would do that. Or the time Peter called Mom and Dad from Chicago while covering the 1968 Democratic Convention and reported what he was witnessing and held the phone up so Mom and Dad could hear the history in the making. And Mom told me all about it with so much admiration and awe. He was not like other dads in the 60s and 70s. He flew on Air Force One with Nixon to China, and he brought back a panda as a gift to the Washington Zoo. My sister was so impressed that she then did a report on pandas for school and told all the little snotty girls at her school all about her uncle. He was an adventure traveler decades before the term even existed. My grandmother raved about his sweetness. My dad raved about his zest for life and his intellect. And we reveled in his wonderful temperament. My sister Liz and Molly would fantasize about if both couples got divorced, and then my Uncle Peter married my mom so they could get away with murder. As a little girl, I was entranced by his spirit of fun and how he and my Aunt Joan were so playful and romantic together. I remember them in matching khaki jumpsuits wrestling. And at their beach house in Canada, they tooled around in a 1913 McLaughlin. But I was most impressed with my whimsical uncle because he bought his kids life-size lions, giraffes, and bears from F.A.O. Schwartz. That's emblematic about his approach to life. He did things that for everyone else was just a fantasy. He made dreams come true for himself, for his wife Joan, and for his 6 kids, my beloved cousins. He always lived life to the fullest. He was always so fit and energetic and athletic. On Uncle Peter's 70th birthday, I was staying at the beach house for one of the millions of birthday parties that he had, just this time of year. And when I woke up, I heard he'd been gone for hours golfing. As soon as he got back, I see him running at age 70 to the beach, where he started windsurfing. And when he was done that, he started rowing. By 10 a.m. on his 70th birthday, he'd done 3 sports. 5 years ago, at 92, after losing his beloved Joan, he saw an opportunity for love and happiness with Anne, and he went for it. At every age, Peter Connors Andrews took a giant bite out of life.
Stories told that when Israel stood at Sinai to receive the Torah, the Holy One said, "Present me with good guarantors that you will guard my Torah, and then I shall give it to you." They said, "Our children will be our guarantors." Clearly, we've seen so much of what Peter carried forth through life, in his values, in his charm, in his joy, reflected in all of you. We welcome Peter's grandchildren and great-grandchildren now to share a message with us.
Do we get everyone? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you all. I swear to I was going to say God, but goodness, that we didn't plan these words based off of what's on the back of your pamphlet. So I think this story will make sense to everyone. From the oldest grandchild to now the newest addition, my son, little Teddy, we stand up here today as a symbol of Pop-Pop's legacy and spirit that will live on long after he has left us physically. From movie nights and popcorn, lots of salty popcorn, and for those of you who all know the Andrews, we all have an affinity for lots of salt from Pop-Pop, to late night fireworks shows on Bay Beach, there are many ways that Pop-Pop left his mark on all of us. For most of us, we learned our first dad jokes, or in his case, Pop-Pop jokes, from a young age. And when Pop-Pop met his great-grandchild Teddy just a few months ago via FaceTime, even at 96, he told a joke to a 1-month-old without pause. True story. Aunt Jules can attest. For many, they knew Pop-Pop as an intense intellect, talented writer, an avid sailor, and athlete. But to us, he was just Pop-Pop. Rest in peace. We love you and will miss you. And wherever life takes us over the years, we promise to never be too serious that we can't tell a joke or in Pop-Pop's fashion of you.
God bless you all. That was absolutely precious, and it's clear that your relationship with your Pop-Pop is so dear, and I just pray that it grows as a source of love, something you cherish in all of your lives. There was so much that we know that Peter cherished. He cherished much all of you that he interacted with and created relationships with. And I feel blessed that as he demonstrated that example through his own life, there's relationships that now grow and continue, that in addition to having a relationship with this congregation and with the rabbi of this congregation and me who arrived not that long ago, he carries a lifelong relationship with Father Yorty, and it's just a privilege to have you here with us to share on that special relationship between you and Peter.
Thank you, Rabbi Gutman, and for your invitation to participate today in this celebration, but also the awareness that now we have experienced such a great loss. And your words bring much healing to me. It's wonderful to be here and to see the new leader of this great congregation, and I wish you the best and Godspeed in your leadership at Temple Beth Zion. Let me break from tradition and open with a text from the Song of Songs, a love poem often heard at weddings. In the final crescendo of the poem, the lover says to his beloved, "Place me like a seal over your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is as strong as death. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot wash it away." We're here today because a man whose love for this world and life almost knew no bounds. First and foremost, his wife, Joan Kostick, of 61 years, and a man who, at his surprise, fell in love again in the late winter of his life with Anne McClelland. So too, he loved and was devoted to his children and grandchildren, and immensely proud of their impressive careers and significant accomplishments. Peter loved this community and his adopted city of Washington, D.C. He and Joan supported through their philanthropy and board leadership the zoological societies of both cities wildlife conservation in Africa, the theater, visual arts, the Buffalo Sabres, and social justice. But their support wasn't just about writing checks and serving on boards. Their involvement was always marked by hands-on volunteering, like the time they delivered Samson, the baby gorilla, to the Buffalo Zoo in the back seat of their station wagon, or hosted a conference for theater directors from across the nation at their farm in McLean, Virginia. And Peter loved this nation, its freedoms and democracy, which he witnessed firsthand threats to during World War II in his service to the Navy, again during Watergate when he was the Courier Express Washington, D.C. bureau chief, and more recently as a concerned citizen during the events leading up to and following January 6th. He had an existential understanding that freedom does not come for free. Peter Connors Andrews, to put it simply, loved life, which his 96 years attest to. After reading his memoir, deceptively titled Bits and Pieces, you come away wondering how one life could encompass not only travel to so many exotic places, often as an emissary of goodwill and cultural exchange, and the befriending of so many prominent people in politics and the arts, but how he and Joan did it so gracefully and naturally and translated these experiences and this network of contacts into projects and programs that benefited the wider communities where they lived, and many afar. Peter was, if anything, expansive. My presence here today as a friend and clergy person is a sign of his magnanimity. He did not quibble over theological boundaries. In his open-hearted, broad-minded way, he conceived of this service, just as he did Joan's, as an interfaith affair, unencumbered by the narrower limits of religion, as necessary as those limits are in the short term. But in the long view, any single religion is too small to completely contain the gift and mystery of life, the wonder and fear of God. Peter's religion broke the bounds of doctrine and denomination and recognized the common ground of our humanity and the essential call to each one of us to live a just life. In fact, I met Peter and Joan years ago when they sponsored, and I'm sure many of you were there, a one-night production in collaboration between this congregation and Canisius College of the Barcelona Disputation of 1263, a debate between the Talmudic scholar Nachmanides and a Christian theologian. The Disputation is an award-winning stage and film adaptation of the only historic confrontation of the two religions when the Jewish position was openly expressed. And because of Nachmanides' deep knowledge of sacred text, the sponsor of the debate, the Catholic king, James of Aragon, recognized him as victor and awarded 300 gold coins and paid homage by visiting the Barcelona synagogue. The evening at Canisius was a vintage Andrews philanthropic occasion. Peter and Joan brought their friend, the iconic Theodore Bickel, from Georgetown to play the part of Nachmanides. My role as pastor of a local congregation was to get the word out, to encourage as many Christians and church members to attend a medieval play that many had never heard of. The evening was a huge success. It was religiously diverse, standing room only, A remarkable performance, of course, by the great Theodore Bickel. A subject, religious diversity, that as a Jew and non-Jew couple, Peter and Joan understood intimately and knew well the need for a broader understanding of. After that evening, Peter and Joan reached out to me, and my wife Carol included us in their visits to Buffalo and often to the gatherings at their summer home in Canada. My hunch is many of you also were included in that wide circle of friendship. We are here to celebrate Peter's life. Much of what I've said so far has been about Peter and Joan, for who they were as a couple fulfilled and completed who they were as individuals. After 2/3 of his long life spent with Joan, much of who Peter was, and Joan also, was who they became together. In a strong marriage, 1 + 1 = more than 2. They transformed, fulfilled, and completed each other. They became better than themselves, I dare say, because of each other. But to say that Peter and Joan were a team is not to say that they were not their own persons. They remained distinctly, charmingly, vividly different. Joan taking center stage, Peter happy to create the stage and watch Joan in action. Joan driven by feelings and passion, Peter more logical, restrained, reasoned, but also passionate, if quietly so. Peter's reserved, balanced, Joan's trademark force of nature presence, and yet what emerged in a one-on-one with Peter was a man of razor-sharp memory, deep intelligence, iron resolve, inexhaustible tenacity, and wonderful humor. He was, in the mold of his Scots Highland ancestors, as tough mentally and physically, and could be as fierce and proud when it came to defending his values and principles as they come. He had an indomitable will to live and make a difference for good. After enlisting in the Navy, for example, following his freshman year at Princeton, a kidney disorder required extensive surgery, after which he came home from the hospital weighing 87 pounds. Back at Princeton the next fall, still weak, he contracted double pneumonia. But he persevered, gained weight, graduated, came back to Buffalo to begin his remarkable partnership with Joan and start a family and career. Yet a tribute to everything Peter was, lover of life, his own person, mentally and physically strong, was his relationship with Anne McClellan. It was a romance conducted across the pond, as they say, including world travel. Peter was deeply proud of his new partner and beloved, and hosted a welcome to Buffalo cocktail party not long after they met. Once we met Anne and discovered her depth, her grace, and wisdom, we understood Peter's new energy, his excitement, and palpable joy. Place me like a seal over your heart. For love is as strong as death. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot wash it away. It seems strange that the biblical writer chooses to compare love and death, for they are polar opposites. the fullness of life and the absence of life. And yet what they have in common is their strength. Just as death is the power that ends life, love is the power that gives life. Love and death are the axis on which humanity turns. Nothing more sublime can be said or added to the meaning of human existence. They are woven through our yeses and nos. It is in Peter's death that we see and appreciate the fullness of his love. The irony is that death does not quench or wash away love, but reveals the full measure of a life, and we better understand and more clearly see a person for who and all that they were. Thank God for the gift of this life. Thank God for the gift of Peter Connors Andrews. Thank God he put the seal of his love not only on so much of this world, but on you and me.
Father, I'm touched by your words and by the love that you convey on behalf of Peter. We're blessed to hear this testimony of Peter's life. Truly, a bright light among us has departed this world, but we can still see that light. It can still be with us. We can hold on to it. The prophet Micah asks, Uma Adonai doresh mimcha, what does the Eternal ask of you? We might ask in language more familiar to us, what is our purpose? What is the meaning of our lives? Yet Micah provides the answer to the question in this instance. He says to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Justice, love, and devotion. In so many ways, Peter fulfilled this obligation with the love that he showed for all humanity, for his family, for life, for our world. He was a joyful soul. He was affectionate. He was kind. Molly and Louise for arranging that I could meet him just as I was beginning here at Temple Beth Zion. I'm so grateful. Thank you. I had the pleasure of sitting with Peter, hearing reflections on his life, as others of us have heard in other contexts. And although Peter never formally converted to Judaism and lived a life of many religions, appreciating the wisdom of all peoples and cultures, he raised a Jewish family. Peter was the one to go and get his family challahs for Shabbat every week. Peter went to Israel 16 times during the course of his life. As we heard, Peter insisted that not only did he take Hebrew lessons, but his companions on his trip joined him in Yiddish lessons as well. And when asked about his faith, he answered with total honesty, I'm very nearly Jewish. Peter's life was intertwined with the Buffalo community and specifically as well with this congregation. From the moment that he married a daughter of a Temple Beth Zion founding family, Joan. Shortly before our old synagogue building at 599 Delaware burnt down in 1961, Peter and Joan had lost their home to fire. When the campaign was begun to build this sanctuary, Joan and Peter pledged the very first donation. This has been your family's holy space for countless services and celebrations. And now to receive Peter's physical presence here one last time. This too is our privilege. We've heard about Peter's athleticism. Something that struck me as we were talking, that Peter used to enjoy skiing when he was younger. He gave it up at 79 years old. And it was at the height of just having completed a double black diamond in Vail. When I went to visit Peter, our conversation quickly turned to his love of rowing, a sport that I too embraced when I was in high school. He picked it up when he was 65 years old. He'd get up, as we heard, early in the morning in his sound-sheltered beach in Fort Erie to row his single-scull rowing boat. The water was calm within. On many occasions, he'd invite a passerby to try some strokes and teach them to row. That place, that was also his serenity. And we've heard a bit about Peter's work. Special, unique, and meaningful. His journalistic assignment took him and his family to Washington, D.C. in 1968. But Joan and Peter returned 5 years ago, and Andy, may you be given comfort and strength for your commitment towards caring for your father these past 2 years. Peter maintained a special and unique relationship with each of you. As they say, no child, no sibling has the same two parents. He wanted to know your interests so that he could appreciate them with you. He wanted to see you nourished and fulfilled. While in Washington, he was on assignment with the Presidential Press Corps. As we heard, he spent a lot of time traveling with presidents and covered many momentous moments in our nation's history. He traveled the world, and as children, you remember getting satellite calls from him. You had one of the first satellite phones around. He was so devoted to you. You remember when he'd come home following a long trip or assignment, he'd get down on the ground. He would wrestle with you. He was also one who loved cuddling. He'd giggle. Julie, on Sunday, you described your father as whimsical, and you shared this special list of jokes. He had a list of magic tricks too, apparently, I'm told. Perhaps a performance later, I don't know if anyone remembers them. Peter was clever and adventurous. Molly, you remember his beautiful writing, his exhibition of fact and detail as compared with your search for mind and motivation. David, you admired your father's patriotism, the openness with which he welcomed people of all kinds into your home. You shared that your father was a friend of people not necessarily who entered his social circle so easily, that Harry Belafonte had come and visited and even sang in your home one time. In your words, he was honest, dutiful, patriotic, loving. He had a heart of gold. Louise, you shared how much you cherished your one-on-one time with him. Above all else, your dad loved. He devoted himself to his family. He would want for you to be strong in this moment. He would want for you to love and share respect and expand your family, welcoming Anne, remaining connected. Peter insisted on living life intentionally. Molly, you shared that he gave you a special audio recording machine as a present one year. And on the 5th day that you spent together, he insisted, aren't you going to interview me? On that recording, some very important advice was imparted. But first, you should love your job, and if you don't, find a way to change it. Second, you should be curious about all life. And third, as we know that he did through his own practice, to get educated in your kids' interests so that you have something to talk about with them. Peter not only preached, but he practiced all these things. He was curious, a constant reader. He enjoyed nonfiction. He loved the arts, as we've heard, and gave many gifts to support, to perpetuate them, some significant ones shared by you, Father. He loved music. He loved music, for sure, a true statement. He loved his Airedale Terriers and Burmese mountain dogs too. He gave them all the same names, though, apparently. Creative in other areas, not here, apparently. It was Minnie and Mike and Teufel, Yiddish for mischief. It should also be mentioned that Peter shared so many additional friends and loves, and we pray that that love is remembered. Truly, these words of Micah, what does the Eternal ask of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. These were all things that Peter practiced and cherished. Peter will be loved most, missed most, by those who loved him most. Foremost, his family, his grandchildren, Louisa, Ella, Charlotte, Peter, Dashiell, Sarah, David, Lucy, Byron, Celia, Clara, and his great-grandson, whom I hope you'll share stories of him. He's so cute, Teddy. Of course, his children, Julia, Peter, Molly, Peter and Vanessa, Louise and Benjamin, and April and Patty. He'll be missed very much by you, Joan. And so we pray that as you remember Peter and the blessings that he brought you in your life, that that blessing is perpetuated, that all Israel, that all who dwell on earth find blessing in Peter's memory. We rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanvei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utohorim, Gezor Arakim Azhirim, Et Nishmo Chaver HaYedidi Shalach B'Shem Peter Carol Connors Andrews Shalach Leolamo Ba'al Rachamim Yastirehu B'Seder Knafav Leolamim Vayitzror B'Yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai hu nachalato ve'anuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Peter Connors Andrews, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated.